Well, hello everyone, welcome back to the bench. This is going to be the second part of the Zenith 6G501M repair. The previous video covered both of the portable Zeniths that I picked up and have committed to working on free of labor charges for someone, just because they're going to be gifts, and I want to get them safe enough to operate without worry of catching fire or anything, or just being disappointed that it doesn't function. Either way, in the last video I took an extremely long look at the insides of these, trying to figure out how it would work on them. I've never really done portables. They're not really my area of collecting interest. I have one. I have one set, haven't opened it up. It's just tiny cramped chassis, multi-section electrolytics, a lot of things just tightly packed together. And I'm used to working on 20s and 30s sets which have cavernous chassis, barring the odd 30s Philco or Magic Brain RCA. Those are special in their own right. Either way, I've already got some work done on the 41 portable here, so I want to take a quick look at what I've already done. I do want to preface this by saying, previously I mentioned that I was going to be using Adaptacaps to replace the two multi-section electrolytics that are in here. There's one just here sticking out, and there's another one at the back at this top corner. Well, my Adaptacaps came in, and as expected, they are exactly as I've seen. They are beautiful, and I can't wait to use them on other projects, because these are actually not the right size for this unit. These are the more standard, more commonly encountered variety of multi-section electrolytic that you find in TVs and test equipment and all sorts of other things. And the multi-section electrolytic in the L505 Zenith portable, the really maroon guy here, is this size because it's from the 50s. This is a wartime set, and it looks like they just there's a smaller version of this, and I don't know if they're planning on making a smaller version of this to fit those. These two guys here are the same size base-wise, but it's a smaller pattern than this guy here. The hole size is probably a 1/4 inch tighter together. Either way, so I can't use those, which means I've had to figure out an alternative means. And what I'm probably going to do is a mix of finding places to attach things that are nearby wiring points. Again, not a lot of room in here, but I think I've got it more or less figured out. As far as current progress, the right side of the chassis is where I focused most of my efforts this week, and I've got all of the wax capacitors on this side replaced. I did have to unbolt this coil assembly here and lift it and move it out of the way so that I could get to this feisty little guy right here and this one in here. They're a little bit trapped under there, and I did manage to get most of the original leads removed. On some of them I did have to use the hook and loop method to get them tied in because of space limitations. There's this 0.1 back here on this side. I was waiting for those to show up in the mail. Got that tied in. Hello. One of the ones that I was concerned with is coming off the volume control / power switch. And there's two of these caps coming off this one terminal here. There's a 0.05, and then there was I forget what this one was, a 0.1. Well, this 0.1 goes to the chassis, and I double-checked the schematic, and the lead on the switch here is, I believe, the positive side of the B+ circuit, and that also so happens to be one side of the line cord. Or, hang on, let me verify that. Yes, actually, depending on which way this is plugged in, this is connected to one of the prongs of the power cord. So there's a 50-50 shot normally that you would have either this being hot or neutral, and this is an AC/DC set, so at the time having a non-polarized cord made sense because you could flip the plug over in order to make the rectifier work. off of 110 DC. So being this is going to be operated on AC, I opted to use a Y-type capacitor safety cap going from this point to chassis. In case that fails, it'll fail open and won't energize anything. And I'm going to make sure that when I wire the new cord, and I am going to put a new cord on it. This one is new-ish, but I'm going to put my own new cord on there. I have enough of them. And wire it so that the neutral is the one going to be connected as the appears to be used as the ground, the floating ground for the set. And that way the hot side will wind up. Yeah, the hot side winds up permanently connected to the plates of the 117Z6, and it also goes through the filament of the 116Z6. And where else? The way the filament string on this is set up is rather interesting. I think they're getting some of the voltage for the tube filaments. That doesn't look like it's coming from B+, but it's an unusual arrangement. Again, not used to working on sets like this. Either way, everything over here has been cleaned up and dealt with. Now, of course, we've got to deal with the left side where the fun is. So we've got this multi-section here, and I've got this multi-section here, and I've already done a little bit of work. You can see this one old electrolytic's been moved out of the way. I went back and checked the schematic, which is really poor, honestly. When it was copied over by writers, it was smudgy. A lot of the details are blurry, and reading a lot of the numbers is damn near impossible in some cases, but this electrolytic up here is supposed to be a dual section 40 microfarad, 20 microfarad, both at 150 volts. This guy is supposed to be a 3-section 120 and 240s. The 240s are, let's see, one of the 40s is 150 volt rated. Let me see here. Yeah, one of the 40s is 150 volt rated. The other 40 and the 20 are both supposed to be 25 volt rated. What threw me off is that what is actually jammed in here is labeled as having 200, 300, and 500 microfarads, and they all appear to be rated at a measly 25 volts. Just confirm that. Yes. Now, what someone has done, because obviously one of those is not going to be rated at 150, is they jammed this thing in here. So here, this is another... See, this one's rated at 20 microfarads, which is half of the original value required for the circuit. I didn't test to see if it worked at all, so I have no idea if it even functions like that. But I don't really like the way this looks, the jamming up like that. So my initial thought was, okay, cut them in half, I can restuff the insides. But with this one can back here, when you open the back of the set, that's going to be obvious. If this was completely enclosed and you'd never see it, I wouldn't care. But because when you go to take the antenna out, it is going to be visible. Having thermal tape wrapping the electrolytic can might look kind of cheap. And just having bare capacitors sticking up out of the remnants of the can base, if I decided to just hack it off there, that wouldn't look very good either. So I'm going to figure out how to stuff them under here, and I've already figured out how I'm going to do this side. I actually had... Where's my other one? I have some terminal posts. These guys. I got a bunch of them at an estate sale. I just bought a whole box of blasted things. These are vertically mounted, and these are isolated. So this bottom one connects to chassis, but doesn't have its own loop attachment, so you can't use it as a ground, really, unless you go through that hole in the bottom. But I'm using one of these over here, and all I had to do was drill out one of the rivets for the old capacitor base. What the guy did who worked on this last was twist the tabs off of the old cans, find a can that was the same size, pop it in, twist the ends back over, and away you go. And then he just hooked them back up as he saw fit. Which is why it looked factory original until I checked the values and realized this is a single section electrolytic over here, which is not original, and the values in this one are wildly off. I'm not actually sure what would happen if you increase the capacitance of that circuit 10 times over At 25 volts, it probably wouldn't hurt too much. I would be more afraid of overloading a rectifier if the 150 volt capacitor had been rated much higher than it should. But this is still half of what it was rated for, so I can't imagine that's very good for it either. So either way, what I've done over here is I've installed this guy. I'm going to use one of these lower posts here as the floating ground. I've already got a ground lead here I'm going to attach to it. We're going to replace this guy. I know these are kind of new electrolytics. I've got an Illinois capacitor and Nishikans I'm going to put in here. All 105 degrees Celsius rated. These are only rated at 85. And WBR, don't recognize that, don't care. So we'll get rid of that, and we'll attach the new ones sideways. So they got room over in this corner to this, and then I can run all the necessary connections to it. This guy right here I thought was a mica-mold capacitor. It is not. It is actually a mica-mold wire-wound resistor. It's supposed to be rated at 140 ohms. It ohms out at about 146. I'm happy with that. I also don't have a 3-watt wire-wound 140 ohm resistor just kicking around. So its connection that goes to the terminal on this CAN capacitor will get moved to the tree here. I also check this dog bone resistor that's in circuit, make sure that's still in spec, and then move it over. And then, of course, the positive wire coming from that CAN lead also goes to the first post on the CAN ohm resistor. I'll replace that over, and then the second capacitor in the string will also get its negative tied there, and so on and so on. So I've got all of that pretty well ironed out. As far as this one, I'm not sure if I can pull the same thing off. I might be able to get a second Christmas tree in over here, but that's pushing it, and it's getting really close to a lot of their components. I'm also going to replace this ceramic disc with a proper 0.01 film cap. You can see the remnants of the original leads there and over here. So I'll get rid of that, put in a regular one. And the wiring going to these, still trying to figure out how I'm going to work that out. So you got these two wires going to the what's supposed to be the 40. We have two wires going to here. The last section of the CAN dome is the only connection going to that capacitor. So if I wanted to, I could actually piggyback off this terminal and then find a floating ground point to use. That wouldn't be too hard. I'm going to think about it. Could I use the CAN dome terminal? I could. It's a little close. I would rather use one of the capacitor terminals if I can, but some of the resistors and things in there might make that a little difficult. So it might be easier to just use that one right there because it is in the neighborhood. The only problem with these is they're a little bit tall. I had to trim this one's phenolic down in order to make sure it wouldn't stick out past that. And in fact, I may have to bend it over slightly just to get a little more leeway. But I'll figure something out. Got that more or less thought of. I've got one wax cap over here to replace a 0.004. That's also got to go to the floating ground of things. And then there was this guy. I had to check the schematic for it because I couldn't seem to find a 0.05 in this general region. What I discovered, though, is this is actually across the power cord. It's the very first cap listed on there. I think it's C5. The schematic for this set isn't done where the values are all next to their respective components as far as the capacitors go. Instead, they simply put C1, 2, 3, 4, 5 next to it, and then the parts list has those components in it, and you gotta go back and forth between the two, which wouldn't be so bad if it was properly legible. Sometimes I can't tell the difference between a 5 and a 6 and an 8 on the schematic, and then I go look at the list and go, that doesn't make any sense and doesn't match up. Finally figured out, yes, this is supposed to be a 0.05, but it needs to be an X-type safety cap because it's across the line. This might be rated at 600 volts. I really don't need that to blow. So that is going to get replaced. I don't have any 0.05 X2 capacitors, though, so I'm going to cheat and use a pair of 0.022s in parallel to bump that up high enough. That's close enough as far as that goes. I'm going to replace the power cord I'm also going to look at heat shrink sleeving a few of the original battery connector connections, because the insulation on these is not doing too well, and this guy right here, which is the B plus connection coming off the end of the can dome, the insulation near the chassis hole is starting to rub off, and I'm surprised there's no grommet right here, because honestly these could chafe pretty easily. So I'm going to look at heat shrinking those. I'll probably take them off one by one, sleeve it, and then put it back in so that it doesn't get damaged. So that's the plan, and I will be right back after that work is done, or if I run into any more problems. So everything is finished up. It didn't turn out quite the way I was imagining it to. I had to make a few sacrifices in my original plan. I had wanted to put another terminal post like this one over here for this cap. Space-wise, it just wasn't going to work. So I nixed that plan and started looking at ways to just place the capacitors that would have been connected here somewhere easier, a different junction point, tube socket, or etc. Since there was only one of these caps here that had a 150 volt rating, the 40 microfarad, that one happens to be on... let's see, I moved it over here, actually. This is coming off the 3Q5 audio output tube, and the wire that ran to the red wire, I actually got rid of it because it was two connections. It came from this tube here and that tube over there. They came together at the electrolytic, and instead of hooking it in place and doing a little flying lead, the installation on it wasn't great. The insulation in a lot of places in here isn't perfect, but it's good enough. That one I decided to just make it a straight run from this connection here to this point here on the speaker socket. And that wire happens to go back to the 3Q5's plate connection. So this capacitor here is connected directly to the plate pin, and it also happens to be right next door to the floating chassis negative that I already had installed on this terminal post. So it was easy to hook it up, and it's not, directly, over the tube or anything, so it's not, shouldn't get too warm there. Now, as far as the 20 microfarad at 25 volts goes, that one's actually kind of hard to see. It's this little guy right here. How close are we? I might have to get you in a little closer, because some of this is... Yeah. Here we go. So this little booger right here, that is our 20 microfarad. He is attached to the very last section of the can dome. I removed the wire that went over to the electrolytic multi-section there, and just terminated it directly. And then the can itself had a number of lugs that were for the ground connection. It is attached to that as well. And then finally, the 40 microfarad at 25 working volts. This one, I tried to find a place to put it. Unfortunately, this one is actually tied to the filament circuit, and so my options were either to tie it over at the 3Q5 or at the 1LN5 stuffed over in this corner here, and neither of those tubes I had access to the filament pins that I was confident I could get. Not only did I not have access to it, but especially over here, there isn't really a chassis or floating ground that was easily accessible to tie this to, which meant that it really did have to go over here. So against my own wishes, I did add this one floating connection. However, this wire is all solid core, and it doesn't deflect a whole lot. And plus, this is extremely low voltage. It's about 6 volts from what I read when it's at full line voltage. So not too worried about that. Everything is heat shrunk just in case. And although I know this set is only ever going to get used with the line cord, which I did put a brand new one on, one thing I did opt to do, because the wire was in extremely bad shape, I completely rewired the original battery socket. Unbent these 4 little ears that are over here extremely carefully. These will break off from work hardening. And I wound up bending them against the surface of the table to get them back on easily. Popped that out, unsoldered the old wires, ran them one by one to their original spots. And the socket just carries A and B voltage. The set develops its own bias. But someday in the future, maybe someone will want to create a battery pack for it. I actually ran into one of the battery packs for one of these at an antique store. But at $45, I wasn't about to go crazy and grab it because I don't have any sets myself that would even use one. Although it would be a cool starting point, get the plug and everything out of it, maybe hollow it out and turn it into a battery eliminator. Either way, this is mostly just there to prevent shorts because at least one of the wires here is going to be tied to the B+ circuit, and that could cause some damage if it chafes on the chassis there. So these are all brand new, nice, flexible wire. And that about does it. Safety caps are in. Those are good. And I also decided to add a inline fuse. I'm going to do the same thing with the L505. For right now, I've got a 1 amp slow blow in it. Since this is a series strung set, at fire up it's going to have very low electrical resistance, and I didn't want to pop the fuse as soon as the switch is flipped. So, got that in there. And I have had it playing. I cheated a little bit, didn't have the camera charged up, but I just wanted to verify that it didn't let the smoke out. Brought it up carefully on the Variac, and I can go ahead and set this up, and we can see how it sounds. Okay, so a moment ago when I had fired it up initially, I was having some issues with reception, things just being a little bit wonky. I pulled all 4 of the Loktals out of the set, and I burnished all their pins with a brass, basically a brass wheel on my Dremel, cleaned all of the residue off with denatured alcohol, and popped them all back into their sockets, and it seems to be working a lot better now. It was fighting me. Right there should be Kixie. I can hardly pick this up in my living room. So that's, this is a pretty sensitive little set. I gotta give Zenith credit where credit is due. This is, for a little portable, operating off of a series string, these little boogers work really well. I'm excited to see what the L505 can do once I dig into that. So that's a good 12 years of improvement over this, and with the use of miniature tubes instead of Loktals and octals. Sadly, there's not a ton worth really listening to in my area, except for Kixie.
And then they got loud and argumentative and refused to go. I don't know how you could refuse to go if I could just wheel you out, but okay. So they were told if they didn't leave of their own volition, they were going to be arrested.
So I'm happy with that. I did check this with my crystal liner, and I am happy with leaving it right where it is. It seems sensitive enough. And, I mean, I don't know how much her grandkids will really, truly use it, per se. But it functions. So, and it's got some safety built into it. And I want to get it back in its cabinet and then check it again, because Lord knows putting it back in the cabinet, buttoning everything up, something might decide not to work. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, I've got the chassis back in the cabinet. One thing I did have to do, I completely ignored the fact that there was a sheet of asbestos underneath the chassis when I pulled it out of the cabinet here. It was attached to the wood board on the inside. I wet that whole thing down with Windex and then carefully scraped all of it out and threw it away. So, no problems there. But was having issues with it earlier. That turned out to be dirty pins. I got that taken care of. And now, should be able to see how it works inside this cabinet with the wave magnet antenna installed in the back there. The only thing I don't like about this is that the little battery flag on there, I can never get it to pop up far enough, and the first few times I installed the chassis, it actually tried to poke up on the other side of the plastic dial cover there. So I had to maneuver the chassis around until it finally found a happy spot.
Mechanical is there for you when you need them most. 1-800-FREE.
And there we go.
BeaconPlumbing.net.
Neil Armstrong waited 6 hours.
The laundry will be ready in just a minute.
Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Plugins. What about this Copilot? This got a lot.
Right there's our oldies station. Too far away, unfortunately. And it's really close to some other stations.
Deputy manager, officer who was...
Which you could be thrown in kind of a couple different reasons, but I think the ankle's pretty much okay.
Become president. Right, right. No, said Stroke. We'll stop it. Hold on. So you have...
But, yeah, it picks up just fine.
On a forest trail. When I grow up, I don't want to be.
Man, the NBA season's gonna be over soon. Then what do? Baseball? NHL season, I know.
And yeah, that's gonna about do it for this set. I'm very pleased with how it operates. It's portables again aren't really my thing, but the amount of work that went into designing these little sets to make them pretty damn good performers, as you gotta give Zenith credit. So I'm sure the owner will be very happy with this. I'm working on getting the advertisement for this framed so that when it goes back to her, she will also have that to give to her grandkids as a sort of a little bonus there. Haven't told her about that yet, so hopefully she appreciates that. Which means, now this one is taken care of, I gotta deal with the Red Menace. And we gotta work on this thing now. But with the Adaptacap in, I'm hoping that this is going to be a lot easier. Although I still got to tear apart the dial assembly and make sure that is working. I'm also working on trying to clean the cabinet up. I've got some Novus plastic polish in, and I'm banging away at that. So that's for next time. But for right now, I'm gonna say, yeah, this went smoother than I thought. Came out better than I thought it would. And I hope she enjoys it. And I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you for watching. And I'll be back here probably next week with an update on the L505.